discuss later. I'm sure that Pak Kim will also take the issues of Ibu Dede into our discussion after the class. But now I think we will proceed with the class, and Pak Kim will present Theravada Buddhism in Southeast Asia, particularly in the mainland of Southeast Asia. Pak Kim, please, your class.
Yep. Terima kasih, Pak. Ini ya bulan Ramadan, dan saya pikir ya semua mahasiswa-mahasiswi di sini menjalankan tugas ibadah puasa, dan saya harap itu ya semuanya diterima oleh Tuhan. Jadi kali ini ya sedikit sedikit lucu, kita belajar tentang Buddhism di tengah Ramadan, bulan Ramadan. Tapi saya pikir itu ya pengalaman yang luar biasa. Kita memperluaskan pandangan tentang agama yang lain. Jadi minggu depan saya akan bicara tentang Islam, dan minggu ini sebelumnya saya bicara tentang Buddhism yang agama yang tidak begitu difahami oleh Muslim di Indonesia. Yes, I will share my material. So we will talk about 4 sub-themes today. And first, I will briefly talk about Buddhist theology, a very concise and brief introduction to Buddhism. And secondly, I'll talk about 2 Buddhist schools. One is what is called Theravada Buddhism, and the other is Mahayana Buddhism, which is practiced in the region of Northeast Asia. And thirdly, I talk about a key features of popular Buddhism in Theravada Buddhism, which is called merit making. And lastly, I'd like to present some materials about Buddhism in traditional Southeast Asian kingdoms. I chose this topic because quite a lot of anthropologists have researched on this issue. You maybe heard about mandala and theater state. So because the theme is connected to Theravada Buddhism, especially in terms of politics, I think the theme, even if a bit different from general ideas on Theravada Buddhism. So these are the 4 sub-themes today, and I expect you to enjoy today's lecture. And as you can see, we have different major religions in Southeast Asia. So we have Catholicism in Philippines and Timor-Leste. Roughly more than 90% of the total population show their allegiance to Catholicism. And we have some, in the case of Vietnam, it is a bit more complex. So anyway, Vietnam is still a socialist country, so it does not support fully religious practices. So we can say the dominant religion in Vietnam is Taoism, a traditional Chinese religion, or Confucianism, and these two are mixed with traditional belief. So the majority of Vietnamese show their faith in Taoistic, Confucianistic, and traditional belief. And there are some Christianity in Vietnam too. And we have Islam on the archipelagos of Malaysia and Indonesia. So as I talked to Mbak Dede before, yeah, there are some places in Indonesia where the religions other than Islam is dominant. And we talked about Jambi, and previously, hundreds of years ago, it was the center of Buddhist training, something like monastery there, in some places in Indonesia. But anyway, these days, about 87% of Indonesians are Muslims, and about 60% of Malaysians are Muslims. And we also have Buddhists in the mainland Southeast Asia. So in Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, about more than 90% of the population have the religion of Buddhism. So it is a very big religion in Southeast Asia. And when we talk about Buddhist theology, yes, the most central idea is reincarnation. And it is a concept which is not present in Christianity and Islam. So you may not be familiar with this sort of ideas. But anyway, in Hinduism and in Buddhism, the key concept is reincarnation. So the life goes on and we're gonna die, and then we will be born again, and life goes on, something like that. It is called, it is what it is compared to wheels sometimes, and circle, something like that. So that's the circle of life of ordinary persons. And for some, there is a chance to get away from this routine wheels of life. So it is called a Nirvana, and it is a state of enlightenment. So the goal of Buddhists is to get out from the routine cycle of death and life, and then get into the state of Nirvana. That's the goal of all Buddhists, I believe, but it's not that easy. So when we talk about Buddhist theology, the second important concept is karma. And it is a very simple idea. Karma is something like a law or a rule that every cause has an effect. So yeah, it can be accepted by everyone. If you do something, it will bring about some result. So when we applied this idea to Buddhist theology, the actions in the previous life effect on this world. So we are living here, and the way how we live and depends on what we have done in our previous life. It's something like that. And accordingly, actions in this world also affects on our next life. So for ordinary persons, life goes on, something like that. And for the layman, the rule of karma is, because it is too abstract, we need some concrete science. So karma can be counted based on merits and demerits. It's something like Bahala in Islam. So if you add some merits, and these can affect your position in the next life. So people dies and can be born as a person, but there is also a chance that people die and reincarnate as a dog or as an insect or as something like that. It depends on what you've done in this world. And then according to Buddhist ideas, our life is full of suffering. we have happinesses. So in that sense, compared to Christianity and Islam, Buddhism is quite pessimistic because they see this world as a world of suffering. There seems to be happiness, but these happinesses does not mean that our life is influenced by the existence of sufferings. And so all of our life is thought to have an element of suffering: birth and aging, sickness, death, sorrow, loneliness, and heaps of sufferings in our life. And according in line with the idea of karma, suffering has causes. The major causes are desire, greed, obsession. And these are the ideas that are shared by other religions. In the case of Islam, you are doing fasting in order to control your desire and greed, something like that. So in this area, there are some similarities among religions. But anyway, suffering has causes. Yeah, it can be desire, greed, obsession, or something like that. So for ordinary persons, we are just living our life full of sufferings, and it is difficult for us to remove the causes of sufferings because we are humans, we are full of desire. So it is not that easy for us to free ourselves from the causes of suffering. And the Buddha teaches that suffering can cease, we can stop our sufferings by removing our desires and by emptying our mind or something like that. So it is the basic idea of Buddhism is quite mystical, based on mysticism. So in order to get out of this world of suffering, you have to follow some mystical practices, and some of them are mystical and some of them are not. But anyway, the key point in Buddhism is that you should remove your desire, you should empty your mind in order to remove the sort of causes which brings about our sufferings. So most of Buddhist ideas are about the paths, the ways how to get out of suffering. So it teaches a lot, and it starts from 5 precepts. And you can see another Pancasila here, and a lot of vocabularies in Indonesia have come from Sanskrit, so we have some similarities of words, and this is what the statue in Nepal, and it shows Pancasila, and it is the 5 precepts for us to get out of the cycle, get out of the wheel of suffering, and to achieve Nirvana. And 5 precepts is not that easy to understand and not that difficult to understand when we think about those precepts from number 2 to 5. Do not lie, abstain, do not steal, do not consume alcohol or drugs. But the first one is a bit different. You are taught to not to kill. So not to kill, which means that you are not supposed to eat animals or something like that. So the Buddhists are encourages not to eat meat, but eat plants or something like that. So these are the basic ideas how to make you achieve some sort of ideal state of nirvana. And we have another rules, and it is called 8 paths. And I think it's also not that difficult to understand. It is a general idea, general good behavior. So it is called 8 right things, 8 paths. So you have to have right view, right thought, and then right speech, action, livelihood, and finally right efforts, mindfulness, and additionally we do some contemplation, meditation. These are the 8 paths. So theoretically, if you follow 5 precepts and 8 precepts, which means 13 precepts, the chances of getting into nirvana increases. But yeah, as you can see, it's not that easy to follow this way. And for those who try to concentrate their life on Buddhist ways, they usually became monks and nuns. And for them, the rules applied multiplies. So the Buddhist calls Vinaya, and these are the rules of discipline for monks and nuns, not for ordinary persons, but those who enter into the Buddhist monastery and follows the teachings of Buddhism totally. So for them, the number of rules are multiplied, and the number of rules is somewhat different, but it is more than 200, 300, so quite a lot. As you can see, in Theravada school, the precepts for monks number 227, and it is more for nuns and more than 300. And the second one, Dhamma Guptaka, it belongs to Mahayana Buddhism. And the third one, it is quite difficult to read, so I don't Mulai Savastivada, is something like that. It is Tibetan Buddhism. So for the layman, for the ordinary persons, the recommended rules and recommended things for everyday life is about 10, about 5 or 8. But for those specialists whose life is totally dependent on Buddhist teachings, the rules multiply. So it is more than, and I once have heard that there may be around 800 something like rules in another Buddhist school. So that's quite a lot, and almost impossible to observe all of them. But the rules that the monks and nuns should follow are not that difficult to understand, as you can see. For example, eating, do not eat loudly, or do not eat rice in large lumps, do not talk while eating, and do not chew rice loudly, do not leave grains of rice, something like that. And these are actually the morals or good behaviors which we teach it to our children. So it is something like not law and rules, regulations, but behaviors recommended for ordinary life in other culture or in other religions. But for monks and nuns, this work has something like strict rules you have to follow. So when they eat, they usually eat in silence. And while eating, because it is recommended that you have to think about the grains where the grains of rice have come from, and who cultivated these rices, something like that. So you have to think about, you have to be thankful for those who cultivated the rice, something like that. And you have to thankful about bird and insects, which have to raise the rice or something like that. So every instance of eating is not just for eating, but to contemplate, to think about the essence of things. So the life of monks and nuns are not that easy. They have to think, they have to follow the rules, think, and contemplate, meditate, even if you are eating or you are walking or you are sleeping. So these are the rules applied for the specialist. And all of them wants to go to the state of Nirvana, and it is the state of enlightenment. And as I said before, it is quite mystical. So you have to extinguish all worldly desires. You have to get out of the world. It is called enlightenment. And in the state of enlightenment, we can understand the truth of life, and we are freed from ignorance. So total liberation, tranquility, peace, not be influenced by outer things. You can concentrate on your own, you can concentrate on the universe, and you can concentrate on the truth of life or something like that. So this is Buddha who meditated under a banyan tree, and who firstly among human beings who entered the state of nirvana. But anyway, so these are the basic ideas that all of the Buddhists in the world share together. In the actual world, there are several Buddhist schools, and two of them, the major school of Buddhism is called Theravada and Mahayana. These are the two basic schools in Buddhism. And if you look at the picture on the left side, we have three different schools. First is Tibetan Mahayana, and second is East Asian Mahayana, and third is Theravada. So in the northern part of Asia, the major Buddhist school is Mahayana. There is some difference between Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese, Korean, Japanese Buddhism, but the basic idea is more similar. So they belong to the same school of Mahayana. And in Southeast Asia, we have a Buddhism called Theravada. And Theravada, the literal meaning of Theravada is teaching of the elders. So how elders have taught, how elders have experienced, how elders have discovered, considered very important in Theravada Buddhism. But in the case of Mahayana Buddhism, the literal meaning of Mahayana is great vehicle. So there is a small vehicle of humans, and there is a great vehicle of monks and yet higher Buddhist persons. Anyway, so there is geographically, the northern part of Asia is dominated by Mahayana Buddhism, and the southern part, Southeast Asia, plus Sri Lanka, are dominated by Theravada Buddhism. And there is some difference, a difference which is in some sense quite wide. And actually, I sometimes think that these are two different religions, something like that. But anyway, we call them, both of them, Buddhism, and Buddha is anyway the key figure in both Buddhism. So anyway, they belong to the same religion. But anyway, it is quite different, and the key difference can be found in the position of Buddha in Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. And in the case of Theravada Buddhism, Buddha is more close to a human being, the first human being who was enlightened, who obtained the state of Nirvana. But in the case of Mahayana, Buddha is more close to a divine being. So if you just use the lens of Islam or Christianity, yeah, it's a bit difficult to understand. Yeah, these two schools belong to the same religion, but the key figure of the religion, Buddha, is viewed differently in Southeast Asia, Buddhism. Yeah, anyway, Buddha is a human being, which means that we have another deity, another God. They should be considered in Theravada Buddhism. But the God in Theravada Buddhism is not that clearly conceptualized. It is something like a big power, abstract power, which cannot be clearly specified. But in the case of Mahayana Buddhism, Buddha is considered as a divine being. Buddha is God. In some sense, we cannot say Buddha is God, but Buddha has the nature of God. So that's a big difference. And in the case of saint, which means that those figures who obtained the state of Nirvana, in the Theravada Buddhism, we call the saint as Arhat, and in Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhisattva. And the identities of these two are somewhat different. So Arhat is the one who is enlightened and escaped the cycle of reincarnation. As I said before, we have the basic idea of reincarnation, and out of the cycle of reincarnation, that's the key idea of Buddhism. So in the case of Arhat, he or she is the saint who is enlightened, and he enters into the state of Nirvana. But in the case of Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhisattva, he or she is the one who is enlightened, but postpones their entry into Nirvana to assist those suffering. So in the case of Mahayana Buddhism, we have a lot of Bodhisattva living together with human beings. They help people. They help people getting out of sufferings. They help people to get into the path of enlightenment or something like that. So the concept of Buddha and the concept of saint are quite different between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. And yeah, these are some other differences. So the sainthood, who can be the saint? In the idea of Theravada Buddhism, only monks can achieve nirvana. So ordinary persons cannot get into the road to nirvana. They have to become monks in order for them to get out of the cycle of fields. But in the case of Mahayana Buddhism, everyone can achieve nirvana. And moreover, the achievement of someone can be assisted by those enlightened. So in that sense, the practice of Theravada is quite individualistic. Only monks can achieve nirvana with his or her, or not her, in this case, with his own efforts. But in the case of Mahayana, it's quite collective. So a group of people can achieve nirvana with the help of bodhisattva. So in some extreme cases, in Korean Buddhism, we have a bodhisattva called Gwansembosa, and that saint tells us that if you chant a certain chanting 3 times, seriously, sincerely, and with your real heart, you can obtain the state of nirvana. So actually, it is a bit a religion for those are not diligent. It is sometimes called that. So if you just chanting the mantra 3 times, you can get into the heaven. That's the idea, which has been propagated by that school. So in this sense, Mahayana is quite collective and does not ask people to carry out difficult tasks, difficult following, observing rules, and not to kill people, not to kill animals, or something like these rules are not strictly applied in Mahayana Buddhism. But if you have some mind, if you have desire, or if you have sincere mind to be freed from will, you can achieve it with the help of saint, something like that. But in the case of Theravada, it is quite individualistic. So you have to do it by yourself. Self-discipline and self-meditation, these are needed for those who want to get in the road to nirvana. So as I said before, the identity, who is the Buddha is conceptualized as human being or a God, or whether the ordinary persons can achieve nirvana, or only monks can achieve nirvana. So there's some differences between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. And actually in everyday life, because of these different ideas, the practice of ordinary Buddhists are quite different. Yes, from now on, we will talk about the popular Buddhism in Theravada in Southeast Asia. And the key points that have been studied by anthropologists has been merit making. So for ordinary persons, it's difficult to become a monk or a nun. So they have to try hard to obtain merits in everyday life, something like seeking pahala in Islamic countries. So the basic idea is that if you want to get into the road to enlightenment, you have to become a monk. If you are born as female, your chance of getting into the state of enlightenment does not exist in this world. You have to wait for the next life. So it is quite male biased. So only monks, not nuns, can obtain enlightenment. So under this condition, then what the ordinary persons have to do? Yes, we just wait next life to become a monk, or do we have to do something for better position, better chance to be a monk in the next life, or something like that. So for a better position in the next life, we have to accumulate merits. And fortunately enough, various chances are given for us to obtain merits. And one of these, this is the picture that the youngsters in Thailand attempted to become a monk, but it's a very short period of time, 2 or 3 months in ordinary cases. So they became a monk for a short period of time in order not to go to Nirvana, but in order to obtain more merit, something like that. So how we can obtain merits? This is one of the very important teaching for ordinary Buddhist, and these are the list of merit-making activities researched by an anthropologist called Tambia. And the number is quite difficult and quite important. So in order to get merits, the highest merits, you have to become a monk. Yeah, but not everyone can follow this way. So there are other activities which brings you some merits. And the second highest one is donating money for building a temple. That's the action which brings the highest points, highest merits to ordinary persons, except for becoming a monk. And thirdly, it is a way of making sons to be a monk. That's another choice that you can make in order to get high merits. And fourth is visiting temples. And fifth is donating for repairing temple buildings and offering food to the monks. And seventh is becoming a novice, temporarily. Living in the monastery is seventh, and eighth and ninth is observing 5 and 8 precepts. So I just add some colors. The green one is related to money, and the blue one is related to rules, actions, observance, something like that. So when you look at the number of activities and the merits these activities can bring, there's some, how can I say, some paradoxic things. So if you get rich in this world and can donate a lot for Buddhist activities, you are supposed to get higher merit. But if you observe such a difficult rules, not to eat meat, not to sleep, not to steal, not to hate, or something like that. That for me, these are rules which are far more difficult. But anyway, these 8 precepts or 5 precepts does not give higher merits than donating money. So in the Buddhist world of Southeast Asia, what is more important for one to get higher merit is to have to accumulate wealth. Then you can use that wealth for getting merit making. And in the case of city, we have some other practices. So offering food in the morning, that's a very important occasion to get merits. But apart from that, releasing fishes in the river and listen to the sermon, meditation, and applying gold leaf to the Buddha statue, giving necessary goods to the temple, visiting temples, something like that. So the actions recommended for merrymaking are slightly different in the city compared to the previous one that was practiced in the rural areas. So because, as I said before, in the process of merit making, money is important. So Buddhists usually spend a lot of money for merit making. And this is one of the result, one of the calculation, which is not that frequently done by anthropologists. But anyway, yeah, it is an average amount. So the year was 2005, about 15 years ago. So average expenses in merit making per person in Thai. So the average one in Bangkok area was about 1,500 baht, which roughly is more than 500,000 rupiah in Indonesia. So it is the average, which means that a lot of persons spend their money for merit-making activities. So in the roughly the national average is 800 baht, which is slightly less than at the time 500,000 rupiah, 500,000 rupiah. Jadi the average is something like that. So you have to pay, you have not pay, you have to donate your wealth for obtaining merit making. That's the usual ways of life in Thailand. And we can see some of socio-cultural functions of merit making. Yeah, of course, the basic one is to give psychological security. So you in this life of suffering, with merit making, you can obtain some sort of security and some sort of assurance that you will be born as a human being. You will be born in a position which is better than today, something like that. So it gives you a psychological security, and also it gives incentives for good behavior. Anyway, to donate your wealth for religious purposes is good. And there are, as I said before, there are the rules, precepts are required for Buddhists are quite belongs to good behavior category. So in that sense, merit making, emphasis on merit making, gives you incentives for good behavior. So when we talk about social aspect of merit making, we can say that a stable community can be built based on merit making, because people are demanded to follow rules encouraged by Buddhist ideas. And so, and also we can think about building family and building community solidarity, because the merit-making actions are done collectively by a family, by a community. So the solidarity among family members and community members could be reassured, reconfirmed through the process of merit-making. And it is said that there are some chances, the merit-making actions offer some chances for upward mobility by transforming wealth into status. So if you get rich, and the more you spend for religious purposes, the more you can get higher status. So the collective merit-making activities, as is seen on the left, on the picture in the left side. So the Thai Prime Minister leads morning merit-making ceremony, something like that. So in the working place, in the schools, in villages, and so people carry out some collective prayers. And if you donate for these occasions, your wealth can be transformed into status, something like that. So that's what anthropologists have talked about the sociocultural functions of mirror making in Thailand, Myanmar, and Cambodia. Yes, these are the ideas, the basic ideas of Buddhism, and one of the popular form of Theravada Buddhism, namely merit making for ordinary persons. And these are another topic of today's lecture, and I will talk about Hindu Buddhism and traditional kinship in Southeast Asia. So we have several large kinship in Southeast Asia, like Majapahit and Srivijaya in Indonesia, and Champa, Angkor, Ayutthaya, and Bagan in mainland Southeast Asia. And these kingdoms were based on Hindu-Buddhist ideas of kinship. And this kinship is based on the idea of mandala. Mandala is the Buddhist idea of the universe, and there are heaps of you may have heard, may have seen this sort of symbols. Yeah, mandala is also used for batik. So some batik motifs are based on this idea of mandala. So there are rectangles and circles, and there should be a center. So according to the idea of mandala, the power of the universe is concentrated on the center. And that power radiates from the center to the periphery, to the surroundings. So these are the basic, very simple ideas of the universe supported by Theravada Buddhism. So when we apply this idea to traditional kingdom, the center is defined by the centrifugal forces, centrifugal and centripetal. Yeah, sorry, the centrifugal and centripetal forces between the center and the surroundings. So the boundary of the kingdom was not fixed. It is quite flexible, and the flexibility was shaped by the forces between the center and the surrounding. The center usually as the center as the source of power in the universe, they attract the surroundings, while the surroundings, insofar as they accept the centrality, the power of the center, they show their allegiance, they obey to the center. That's the power relation is quite fluid and is not fixed. It should be continuously checked and rechecked under the system of this mandala polity. Oh, sorry. So we know that Borobudur is following the model of mandala. When we see Borobudur from the sky, we can see rectangles and circles. So these Borobudur is modeled after mandala, and we can find out another mandala in Angkor Wat, and I think you may have chance later next year or after pandemic we might have a chance to visit Cambodia. So anyway, when we see Angkor Wat from the sky, we can easily find out model of mandala. And in Myanmar, Shadogun Pagoda also follows the model of mandala. So when we look at traditional architect temples of Southeast Asia, we can easily find out the model of mandala. So as I said, when mandala, the model of mandala is applied to the state, we can find out some characteristics like this. So the king, those at the center, is viewed as God. So it is called God King or Buddha King, divine kingship. So traditional Southeast Asian kingdoms are based on the idea of God King. And the radiation of God's power, King's power to the surroundings as the center, the God, the King symbolize the center, and the King radiates his power to the surroundings. So closeness to the King, if you are close to the King, you can get a power. You can share the power of the King. So that's the idea. Closeness to the King corresponds to the amount of power one obtained. So because the king is considered as God, and the king king could bring you some power. So you makes efforts to be close to king in order to obtain power from share king's power. So those accepting the king's power expressed their obedience to king. So it is simple. The king shares his power to the followers. And the followers, because they obtained power from the king, a part of power from the king, they show their allegiance, express their obedience to the king. That's the basic idea how mandala and nagara work together. And lastly, insofar as this idea of God King maintains, the capital could influence the surroundings, yes. But this statement indicates that if the idea of God King could not be maintained, the capital could no longer influence the surroundings. So it is quite conditional. People have to accept the idea that our king is God. If not, they do not show their obedience to the king. So it is quite conditional. The king has to continuously demonstrate that he is God, something like that. So this idea of mandala and nagara has been conceptualized somewhat differently. So for example, Walters called it mandala polity, and Tambia called it galactic polity, and Lieberman called it solar polity. Yeah, all of these ideas, for me, shows the same kinship, same operation of kinship, but anyway, they prefer different words to explain it. So in the case of Clifford Geertz, he called it theater state. So anyhow, even if they use different conceptualization, the basic idea is quite similar. So the working of kinship in Southeast Asia is quite conditional. The God King should show that he is God. And insofar as this idea is accepted, the followers accept the authority of the king. But if the idea that the king is not God, is spread to the general populace, then the king is no longer can no longer control its surroundings, and the kingship and the kingdom collapses, something like that. So we can see the application of idea of mandala and nagara in Malaysia, in Thailand, And in Indonesia too, we can find out some examples, fine examples. And I think the case of Negeri Sembilan in Malaysia is a very good example that the idea of mandala applies to the real geographical area. So as you can see, we have center and we have surrounding areas, and the surrounding areas have their own satellite areas. So when we look at the system of Ayutthaya, we have center in Bangkok, and we have another tribes and something like that. So the picture that these scholars have drawn is based on the real historical geographical distribution of states. Okay, and of these concepts, I have selected the idea of Clifford Geer's that Negara is to state, and the basic idea is the same. The king is considered as the center of the universe. So the center had spiritual power, and the surroundings showed their political allegiance. And one of the ways for the center to maintain its spiritual power is to use cultural dominance. So the center, the capital, construct splendid architectures, buildings, temples, and the center carried out large-scale rituals and ceremonies. So with these cultural dominance, the center confirms to the surrounding that the king is still God. So you have to demonstrate, you have to show your political allegiance to him. So these are the basic ideas, and Clifford Geer's called it theater state because, yeah, the splendid architectures, large-scale rituals, yeah, they should show the splendidness of the kingdom, something like that. So he uses the term theater state. And at the same time, Clifford Geer's points out some internal contradiction of theater state in Southeast Asia. So when everything went well, there seem to be no problems. But it happens that there are sometimes emerges a rival kingdoms, which is not far from the present kingdom. So when rival kingdoms emerged, the kingdom have to find out ways to tackle the offense from rival kingdoms. But because of the logic of cultural dominance, when rival kingdoms emerged, the kingdom spent more resources for more extravagant events. When the political situation is unstable, they resort to cultural domains to make the kingdom more stable. The way is to build bigger buildings, temples, and to carry out more bigger and more extravagant ceremonies, something like that. So when the more splendid the ceremonies, the problem is that the more the consumption of economic and human resources. So whenever the kingdom felt that they need more political stability, they need more stronger allegiance from the surroundings, they have to spend their economic and human resources to build much bigger buildings or to celebrate much more bigger rituals, something like that. So in the process of showing off their cultural greatness, splendidness, the kingdom is deprived of political and economic resources. And finally, the kingdom collapsed. It's something like that. So Gears call it inner contradiction of theater state. So when the kingdom was at the center of what political allegiance, it usually does not have no problems. But whenever there's some rival kingdoms emerge, the kingdom have to react by consuming economic and political power to carry out more bigger construction work or more bigger celebration of rituals or something like that. So their resources are consumed for non-political, non-economic things. And then the kingdom does not have resources to defend itself. So according to Gears, the Mandala-style political system could not be transformed into a centralized, a bigger political system, but it repetitively, the kingdom emerged and then collapsed and reemerged again, collapsed again, something like the teachings of Buddhist ideas, that the life goes on and then you die and then you were born again and your life goes on and you died again, something like that. So traditional Southeast Asian kingdoms could not be transformed into a much bigger one, much centralized system with centralized systems, something like that. But the kingdom, the life of kingdom is something like that of human beings. So it emerged and then it collapsed. It emerged, collapsed because of the idea that the political legitimacy could be strengthened by cultural dominance or something like that. So with this repetition of emergence of kingdoms and collapse of kingdoms or destruction of kingdoms or something like that, we can add some interpretations. And one of the interpretations is that the influence of Buddhism, which means influence of India, was strong in Southeast Asia, but Southeast Asia kingdoms selectively accepted Indian influence. So the kinship, the working of theater state, as I have said before, was not present in India. It is very specific to Southeast Asia. So with the case of theater state, we can say the Southeast Asian kingdoms selectively accepted Indian influence. So in Southeast Asia, we don't have, even if the Hinduism had influence in Southeast Asia, we don't have caste system in Southeast Asia. And here and there, we can find out some sort of syncretism. So these two, in addition to theater state, we can say that these demonstrate that the centrality of Southeast Asia against the outside world, which means that when Southeast Asia embraced influence from outside, they make it work in their own terms. They do not accept it wholly or totally, but they always use outside influence for their inner benefits, something like that. So we have Buddhism, Hinduism, and we have Western ideas, we have Islam, or we have something like that, but still Southeast Asia have its own distinctive ways of embracing these outside influences. That could be one of the interpretation that we can add from the idea of theater state. And we are now at the end of our lecture, and I just show some additional idea of theater state, how it can be applied to the modern world, something like that. And among us, are there anyone who can say this is the picture of which city? Yeah, it is a picture of some city. And could you tell me, is there anyone who can tell us which city is this? Yeah, and the impression that you can get from the picture is that the city is quite modern.
Yeah.
And it is well planned. And it's very clean, something like that. So it is a very good city, good looking city. And surprisingly enough, this is the picture of Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. So there are some anthropologists who are trying to use the concept of theater state to explain North Korea. So as you can see, the economic condition of North Korea is really bad. So if I use something like GDP per capita, it is far less than Laos. It is less than $1,000 per person per year. So North Korea belongs to one of the poorest country in this world. But still, if we just look at the capital of North Korea, it is not like the capital city of underdeveloped countries. So if we go to the capital city of North Korea, we can see splendid architectures. So the left picture on the left side, it is the biggest hotel in the world. So it is something like 60 floors or something like that. And the number of rooms are the largest in the world. But what I heard is that it is empty because it's too big. They cannot manage it properly. So it is something like bankrupt or something like that. So the outer appearance of the hotel is great, but yeah, it is not open, but it is bankrupt. But still, if you just look at the view of North Korea capital, yeah, it shows that this is a very modern and well-planned city, something like that. And you may viewed the sort of parade or ceremonies of North Korea from in TV, because it is a very big, it brings about a lot of interesting and collective things in these ceremonies. So, so the TV station likes to shoot these ceremonies. So even if North Korea does not have economic resources, they hold 2 or 3 times every year a very big parade and ceremonies. And you can see hundreds of thousands of persons gathered together in North Korea to celebrate the birthday of the president or late president, or birthday of Socialist Party or something like that. So several times in a year, they carry out massive ceremonies. And you also heard that North Korea is now developing nuclear power, nuclear missiles. And this also can be viewed as a symbol of the regime superiority. Even if the country itself is very poor, the capital looks like very rich, and they have, with the nuclear missiles, they demonstrate that North Korea is technology. The technology of North Korea is quite high, and they are ready to fight against the US. I think North Korea is one of the countries in the world who are brave enough to fight against the US. So in that sense, North Korea regime at this very moment is quite similar to traditional kingdoms in Southeast Asia. They try to show their power with these ceremonies and buildings and architectures. And with these, they try to show their superiority. And it is a sort of cultural dominance, which we have talked about in traditional Southeast Asian kingdom. So that could be an analysis that anthropologists had made about North Korean regime. Then after that, some raised a question that, as I said before, the theater state has some sort of inner contradiction. They have to consume their political, economic resources for maintaining cultural dominance, which means that they are getting poor and poor with these massive ceremonies, with these massive buildings and nuclear missile. So are there possibility of the collapse of the North Korean regime? That could be a question. And if we look at the history of Southeast Asia, some said that it's possible, but we have to see whether it can be acceptable or it is realizable in the near future or not. So I think the theater state, the concept of theater state, mandala, is still relevant to understand some of the working of political system in the modern world. So there were some who tried to use this model to analyze the autocratic regime of Suharto, because at the time we can also see several architectures or several ceremonies which shows the greatness of Indonesia. So in this concept, even if it came from the analysis of South Asian kingdoms, but I think it is still relevant to use to analyze the present state of the modern world. Yes, anyhow, that's what the material that I have prepared for today. And we have still some time, so maybe we can have a lovely talk over today's material. Yep, thank you, Barimbo.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Kim. I think we can start our discussion. Perhaps some of you would like to ask some question or comment to this morning lecture. Is there anyone who would like to share some ideas, some animated version of this lecture, probably? Is there any? Or perhaps Pak Kim would like also to highlight some issues that Ibu Dede has discussed this morning before, while the up and down of the old kingdom, the old Buddhist kingdom in Indonesia. But also, I'd like to, if you look at this issue, especially the last part of your lecture regarding negara and state, negara theater or something like that, I think it's also interesting to discuss with the new plan of our government now to build a new capital in East Kalimantan, in Penajam. So if you look at the market of the area, then it will be a huge complex of capital, which is a huge building too, and a new monument, of course. And I'm sure if you follow some of the recent development in the area, that president also made some ceremony in the area by camping in the area, if you heard that one. They came with all governors, ministers, and all his staff, and they do a ceremonial or ritual. And I believe that this would also happen. So when the capital is already there, then a huge ceremony we also conducted in this area, like the one we have in Jakarta now. So yeah, for me, it's something like that, replicating the theater in the old kingdom. And I do not hope that it will bring the kind of breakdown in sometime in the future for Indonesia. But somehow this phenomenon is replicating and always replicating. So it's like it's to repeat itself. And we are just paving our doomsday, probably. I'm not sure. But you can say that if we look at the inner contradiction within the negara and theater concept. So I'd like also you to comment on this issue, particularly Indonesia. You mentioned about North Korea, for us it's really full of theater, full of show of force, and that's really a big ceremony too, and centering the cult for the leadership of. I think it's probably is part of your clan too, because it's Kim too. Yeah, probably I'd like to hear some comment of that, and probably others. You will also like to tackle some issues that Ibu Dede has discussed this morning too. That's my comment, and perhaps I would like to hear some other from the student or from our audience here. Please do so.
Yes, any question is welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Joe? Or
I would like to give some comment, but I will wait for the student first.
Yeah,
it's more important.
Oh,
Boleh
right.
bahasa Indonesia, mungkin boleh bahasa Indonesia ya komennya untuk mahasiswa ya.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
Pak Kim juga bersedia kok. Jadi mahasiswa silahkan loh bertanya. Pak Kim oke bahasa Indonesia juga.
Ya. Ada?
Karena menarik ya. Kita bisa lihat ajaran-ajaran Buddha dalam kehidupan sehari-hari. Tadi juga Prof. Kim sampaikan bahwa Buddhism is more pessimistic than Islam, begitu ya. Saya kira Buddha lebih pesimis dibandingkan Islam. Gimana tuh pendapatnya para mahasiswa kita? Bisa memberikan komentar tentang itu. Apakah iya dalam kehidupan sehari-hari atau bagaimana? Atau misalnya tadi hanya saya lupa Mahayana atau Theravada yang menyampaikan bahwa hanya monk yang bisa mencapai surga, begitu.
Theravada.
Seperti itu. Dan seperti itu. Jadi menurut you all the student, how about that, begitu? Apakah menurut Anda itu apapun lah ya, opininya seperti apa, begitu bisa disampaikan di dalam diskusi kita pada kesempatan ini. Kita punya ada siapa aja nih? Ada Aryo, ada Raihan, ada Sarah. Saya kira cukup. Ada Joe. Where's your voice, Joe?
Ya Bu, masih mencerna.
Kebanyakan sahurnya kali ya, atau gimana? Atau masih sarapan?
Tadi yang menarik ini Bu, bagian terakhir sih Bu, yang soal pembangunan ini ya Bu, ya, negara-negara yang mungkin terkesannya underdeveloped ya, tapi kok bisa bikin yang arsitektur yang megah sekali gitu, dan itu saya juga belum lama ini mendengar, ini bukan negara di Asia ya, tapi di Eropa, tapi memang apa ya, memang mungkin ini bisa dilihat juga di negara-negara yang terlihat kayak mungkin banyak juga negara yang dipimpin oleh pemimpin otoriter gitu ya, yang dimana ya mereka menunjukkan dominasi mereka lewat arsitektur-arsitektur yang bahkan bisa dibilang memecahkan world record gitu, yang bahkan kalau stadion bola terbesar itu kan di Korea Utara ya, cuman kalau kita lihat sendiri apakah tim sepak bola Korea Utara sebagus tim sepak bola Eropa gitu ya, belum tentu juga gitu, bahkan di Asia juga bukan yang terbaik tapi bisa stadionnya paling besar gitu. Jadi apa itu benar-benar menunjukkan ya kayak ya lewat arsitektur yang megah, lewat glamor mungkinnya terlihat wah megah banget nih, bagus gitu, tapi di dalamnya kan nggak ada yang tahu gitu. Jadi bisa dilihat ya lewat gedung-gedung yang bagus ini ya dominasi mereka bisa diperlihatkan gitu, bagaimana mereka ingin menunjukkan kayak ya kita ini punya kekuatan gitu, membuat hal-hal ya nuklir lah atau membuat arsitektur megah tuh kita bisa gitu. Itu sih Bu yang menarik Bu yang saya lihat tadi ya, kayak bahkan sempat agak ketawa dikit gitu. Kayak oh iya ini juga dilihat di negara-negara otoriter lain juga bahkan gitu Bu, kayak memecahkan rekor-rekor yang mungkin kok ngapain dipecahin sih, cuman kalau mereka mecahin arsitektur yang kayak nggak penting juga kan bisa kayak
Kita kan
menemukan rasa
punya
respect
Museum
orang
of
gitu.
the Record, Joe.
Iya,
Apa rekorin ya?
iya apa-apa Bu. Jadi yang mungkin tidak penting juga ya, kayak buat apa
Iya.
bikin gedung gini. Cuman ya memang mungkin bisa dihubungkan dengan yang tadi ya, yang state tadi ya, yang dimana cultural
Theater,
dominance itu
kemudian
penting gitu.
ya teater bisa disebut juga sebagai stage, panggung begitu ya, atau juga it's the power of symbol begitu. Jadi ya ketika banyak pihak masih mementingkan tadi appearance begitu ya, di atas panggung begitu, di stage, sebagai teaternya atau simbol itu menjadi sangat penting ya, sebenarnya kita bisa mengatakan bahwa kita kembali ke masa-masa di mana simbol itu menjadi penting begitu ya, seperti
Ya,
itu.
tapi ya seperti tadi Mas Jonathan bicara, saya pikir itu ya kalau kita cuma bilang ya kalau dulu simbol itu penting, kalau sekarang political atau economic power itu lebih penting, tapi sebetulnya kondisi yang North Korea menunjukkan itu bahwa simbol cultural dominance, legitimacy melewati kebudayaan itu masih diambil oleh orang politikus. Jadi menurut saya kita kadang bicara soal political economic power or something like that, or military power or something like that. But still, I think for anthropologists, yeah, we can find out some elements for cultural dominance, how culture works for political legitimacy, strengthening political legitimacy is, I think, one of the topics that anthropologists have to contribute. So like Jonathan said that there's a big stadium sepak bola, but ternyata tapi tim nasional sepak bola North Korea yang mereka tidak pernah masuk ke World Cup or something like that, but still they want to have a very big stadium. And I think maybe Pak Rimbo atau Mbak Dede menggunakan paradigm itu untuk menganalisasi ibu kota yang baru seperti tadi. Itu ya hal yang luar biasa. Ya karena Indonesia, apalagi karena sekarang presidensi Pak Jokowi itu sedikit ada sedikit ya unsur autokratik atau macam gitu. Jadi ya itu pasti ada hubungan, dia mau memperayakan kekuasaannya dia untuk kepentingan dia sendiri macamnya. Saya pikir jadi ahli antropologi Indonesia harus menganalisis macam kejadian gitu, Pak.
Ya itu memang terlihat zaman Soeharto ada banyak seremoni juga, ada banyak monumen dibangun dan itu berjenjang sampai di daerah begitu ya. Tapi pada regime sekarang pun dengan rencana perpindahan ibu kota baru, saya menunjukkan itu juga begitu. Meskipun dalam kondisi sekarang kita lagi punya kesulitan ekonomi, sehingga banyak diskusi di antara beberapa ini di sini bahwa perlu nggak kita pindah karena sangat mahal dan segala macam. Dan itu terlihat sekarang malah bahwa ada ketidakmampuan dengan cara mengundang partisipasi warga, rakyat, untuk iuran, untuk urunan buat kota baru gitu. Ya sesuatu yang agak ironis begitu ya. Satu sisi kita memang sedang kesulitan, tapi sisi lain proses politik membuat itu baru jadi hal yang ini jadi urgen gitu. Padahal mungkin juga tidak. Saya nggak tahu, mungkin kalau rezimnya ganti apakah itu bisa dicabut lagi, kita akan lihat. Tetapi ya kita tunggu mungkin 2 tahun lagi sebelum pemilu kita akan tahu gitu ya. Tapi itu juga mungkin yang kita bisa lihat pada beberapa, bahwa monumen itu adalah satu sisi monumen yang dibangun di Mesir, Mesopotamia, atau juga di Eropa sekarang, yang itu menjadi landmark dari satu kota, satu tempat. Itu juga selain menggambarkan kemegahan, keagungan bangunan fisiknya, juga kekuasaan gitu ya. Jadi beberapa itu menunjukkan aspek itu, dan tampaknya itu juga terlihat di sekarang Eropa, di Inggris dengan Buckingham Palace atau mungkin Windsor atau siapa, itu menunjukkan ada power di situ. Tapi mungkin karena sejarah mereka panjang, jadi mereka juga belajar bahwa itu saja tidak cukup, tapi harus ada sistem yang jauh lebih ini lagi harus mereka bangun. Itu yang lain ya, yang kita lihat. Tapi di beberapa yang baru juga kita melihat di Timur Tengah tampaknya juga ada hal-hal seperti itu. Terutama mungkin di Dubai atau Emirat, yang tampaknya juga mereka menyulap beberapa kawasan yang asalnya itu laut menjadi pulau-pulau dan segala macam, itu juga menjadi. Tapi mereka kan bertumpu pada minyak. Tapi begitu minyak habis, saya nggak tahu apakah ini masih bisa bertahan atau tidak, begitu itu juga problem. Jadi ya mungkin orang bisa melihat bahwa monumen bisa jadi kebanggaan, tapi bisa juga menunjukkan satu yang paradok itu tadi, bahwa itu juga menunjukkan satu pertunjukan yang katakanlah ya ingin menunjukkan dominasi, tapi sebetulnya itu juga dibangun dengan kemiskinan, mungkin akan berujung dengan eksploitasi orang ataupun sumber daya, dan apakah itu nanti akan sustainable, itu pertanyaan yang kita nggak tahu kapan. Kalau misalnya Pak Kim melihat cycle dari naik turunnya kerajaan-kerajaan kuno, kerajaan klasik di Asia Tenggara, apakah dengan model waktu yang itu juga kita bisa melihat? Artinya dengan mengambil periodisasi kapan dia naik, berjaya, dan runtuh, apakah hal itu juga kita bisa lihat untuk konteks sekarang begitu ya? Dan itu saya pikir pekerjaan menarik kalau melihat bagi antropolog untuk menganalisis banyak hal terkait dengan naik turunnya peradaban itu. Itu mungkin. Tapi saya nggak tahu nih. Mungkin dari kelas, dari teman-teman yang lain ada yang mau komentar? Silakan.
Saya mau bertanya, Pak.
Oke, silakan.
Okay. Hello, Prof. I want to ask: is there a doomsday in Buddha? If there is a doomsday in Buddha, what gonna happen to people who have not reached the Nirvana? There is no a doomsday, when the cycle will end gitu. Do you think the cycle will end if there is no doomsday in Buddha? Cycle ends mean everyone reach Nirvana. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, giving us the insight into the idea of Buddhism compared to other religions. So in the case of Islam and Christianity, we have the concept of doomsday, and we don't know exactly when it will come, but anyway, in the future sometime there would be a doomsday, and we all be punished or gifted by by the coming of Doomsday. But in the case of Buddhism, we don't have a concept like Doomsday. So the life goes on and on and on, is something like that. And only those who are fortunate enough to be saved, or those who do their own efforts to get away from the cycle, they can get into the Nirvana. Apart from them, others, I have to live continuously in this world. So the concept of time is repetitive in Buddhism. So the same thing happens in the future, exactly the same. So it goes on and on and on, like the wheel of anything, like the wheel. So that's the difference between religions coming from Middle East and religions coming from India. So that idea is one of the key concepts which differentiate between Buddhism and the religion from Middle East. Is that okay? Yeah, I think that is a very good question to understand the difference between these two different traditions of religion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. But do you think there is a chance if every people will reach Nirvana, or not at all? But its lives gonna keep goes on and on and on. Then there is no point where there is no one live in the world, but everyone live in Nirvana.
Yes, I think the Buddhists have an expectation to get into Nirvana, but because the life goes on, I think not everyone can be saved or can be assisted by saints to get into Nirvana. So Nirvana is a state that everyone wants to get into, but not a state that everyone can get into. So it is something like an expectation, something like a very big goals of life. But according to the theology of Buddhism, because life goes on and on, if everyone enter into Nirvana, then who maintains their lives in this world of suffering? So life goes on, and only the selective few can enter into the state of Nirvana. And the number might be added continuously as some more enter into the Nirvana. So in that sense, the number increases, but still not everyone can enter the state of Nirvana. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Yeah. One question from me. Prof Kim mentioned that Buddha is not God previously, right? And if Buddha is not God, so who's God for the Buddhism, according to Buddhism?
So in Mahayana, we call God as Buddha. It's quite simple. So in its original form, it is said that Buddha is a human being who were enlightened first.
But
so which means that the God and Buddha is different beings. And then we can raise a question: who is God? And they say that there is no name to call God, but it is something like an abstract power which created this world. So there is no definite name to designate God in Buddhism. In the case of Theravada Buddhism, so they have a concept of God but Buddha is not God. Then who is that God? So, and it is something like a mysterious power which created this world, which created how the sufferings and karma goes on and on and on. So it is called generally for example, generally a power to create this world, something like that. And because this idea is quite abstract, so when Buddhism came to Northeast Asia, they tried to converge the idea of Buddha with God. And if we make that in that way, yeah, it's more simple. God is Buddha, and yeah, we don't need to think about who is God or something like that. So the Mahayana Buddhism is more people-oriented than Theravada one. So because ordinary people is hard to understand the difference between Buddha and God, so they just put it together and say that Buddha is God, is something like that. So people can be more concretely understand. But in the case of Theravada Buddhism, yeah, who is God, something like that, it is a question which is quite tricky.
They have the concept of God, right? But they don't put it on a name or yeah, okay.
Parimbo, I think I have to go now.
Yeah,
I have to prepare for the next lecture.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you for your lecture. I think we still see you next week.
Yep.
You will talk about Islam. This thing, if you now talk about the mainland and the major religion in the mainland of Southeast Asia, then next week we will talk about Islam, which is dominant in the archipelagic of Southeast Asia. So we'll see you then. Thank you for this morning lecture and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you, Pak Kim. Terima kasih.
Ya, Bu Budi. Bati.
Ibu Wati. Oke, terima kasih. Selamat siang.
Selamat siang.
Ibu Wati, how
Iya.
alles
Apa? Good, Terus?
Ini jurusan ya?
Iya, ini kok cuma 14 mahasiswa ya, cuma sedikit
Ya, nggak
sekali.
tahu, beberapa mungkin ada yang ujian, ada yang apa gitu ya, tapi ya oke lah. Ya, saya lihat ada beberapa yang ini. Siapa yang dari itu nggak datang ya? Siapa? Rana atau siapa? Yang dari sastra Inggris.
Siapa namanya?
Raka. Ya itu.
Ada banyak dari kita juga harusnya kan 23.
Iya, yang terdaftar sebenarnya ya begitu. Tapi ya oke lah.
Jadi Raka dapat tapi kayaknya keluar sebentar.
Oke.
Oke.
Ya. Ya mungkin beberapa tentang ini mungkin belum ini ya. Tadi yang negara teater dan segala macam kayaknya kalau Anda belajar etnografi, saya lupa dulu. Saya dengan Pak Andung diskusikan itu mungkin tentang GERDS, tapi khusus itu ya kita sempat diskusikan. Hanya mungkin agak sedikit lain. Saya nggak tahu apakah anak-anak yang semester 4 ini atau mungkin beberapa di antara Anda sempat mendapatkan GERDS atau diskusi tentang GERDS dalam kuliah yang lain.
Ada dari saya sebetulnya.
Ya, tapi itu lebih ke kerabatan.
No. Di teori antropologi modern itu masukan yang mengenai interpretatif ya, bahwa bagaimana pengaruh penelitian GERDS sehingga sampai menjadi bagian dalam pembentukan teorinya. Penelitiannya GERDS di Asia Tenggara itu membawa pengaruh pada pembentukan teorinya.
Iya betul, tapi GERS ini kan banyak aspeknya ya. Dia di ekologi iya, kemudian di ekonomi juga, kemudian di religi dan juga politik begitu ya. Nah, saya nggak tahu apakah yang GERS yang aspek religi dan politiknya ini yang kemudian juga agak detail didiskusikan seperti yang tadi begitu ya. Itu kan sebenarnya konsep religio politik gitu ya yang kemudian itu menjadi analisis kita untuk melihat pasang surut dari negara klasik begitu.
Iya, kalau saya hanya ingin menambahkan sebetulnya bahwa agama tadi seperti dijelaskan oleh Pak Kim, itu ada Theravada itu menambah keragaman di Indonesia. Jadi keragaman di Indonesia itu bukan hanya etnisitas, di Asia Tenggara juga sekaligus, bukan hanya berdasarkan etnisitas, tapi berdasarkan agama. Agama pun bukan hanya Islam, Buddha itu dibagi lagi, ada Buddha Theravada dan Buddha apa satu lagi yang dua aliran itu kemudian banyak, sehingga begitu beragam, keragamannya semakin tinggi sekali di Indonesia itu, dan itu juga diwujudkan di dalam kepartaian dan sebagainya, dalam politik segala. Itu Pak Rimbo.
Oke. Ya ini sebenarnya waktunya 3 menit lagi. Saya nggak tahu mungkin dari teman-teman mahasiswa yang lain ada yang mau ini. Halo, saya di sini nggak ngedengar. Ini ada Kara Yulia, ada Sarah, Junita, ada Audi, Dani, Aryo, Alisa. Saya belum dengar dari Alisa juga. Ya, kira-kira gimana nih? Dani, Audi, Aryo, Alisa, Kara, Raihan. Raihan ini disebut beberapa kali tapi nggak. Raihan, Radia, sorry. Dia beberapa kali saya minta tapi nggak muncul juga. Gimana?
Saya boleh, Pak?
Dari saya belum ada, Pak.
Belum ada?
Saya boleh, Pak?
Oh, boleh.
Tadi itu saya sempat ingin bertanya gitu sebelum berakhir kelasnya. Kenapa kan dulu waktu zaman kerajaan Hindu Buddha itu adalah kerajaan yang kuat di Asia Tenggara, Kepulauan Asia Tenggara ini. Tapi kenapa mengalami sebuah kemunduran sampai akhirnya jumlahnya itu berkurang drastis gitu. Apakah agama Islam yang datang itu ada perannya juga gitu dalam kemunduran jumlahnya, atau masih ada cara-cara lainnya gitu, di mana agama Buddha itu bukan lagi menjadi kepercayaan yang dominan di Asia Tenggara Kepulauan. Mungkin tadi sempat kepikiran itu tapi belum sempat. Mungkin minggu depannya masih sempat ngebahas Islam juga kan minggu depan. Mungkin ditanyakan minggu depan gitu sih kalau dari saya.
Ya, kamu orang Palembang kan mestinya juga ngelihat di situ ada Sriwijaya. Sriwijaya itu pusat pendidikan agama Buddha. Bahkan itu juga jadi center gitu ya, jadi pusat pendidikan khusus untuk ini. Saya nggak tahu, mungkin kalau kita ada satu teman kita angkatan senior Anda, dia kebetulan juga Buddhis dan juga Buddhis yang Tibetan begitu ya, namanya Stanley. Mungkin kita bisa undang dia juga untuk bicara nanti, untuk melihat kalau memang diperlukan, untuk melihat bagaimana sisi orang yang melihat Sriwijaya sebagai salah satu pusat pendidikan Buddha yang terbesar pada masanya. Tapi kemudian karena banyak aspek tentunya, bukan hanya karena masuknya Islam saja, yang membuat kemudian Sriwijaya kolaps begitu ya. Dan itu terjadi pada semua kerajaan klasik di Nusantara begitu ya. Sekarang mungkin tidak ada. Meskipun kita melihat ada beberapa negara di Asia Tenggara daratan yang masih ya katakanlah bisa kepanjangan tangan dari negara lama yang klasik mereka dulu, seperti misalnya di Kamboja, Thailand, Birma juga dulu sebuah kerajaan, di situ ada kerajaan Pagan, ada kerajaan Shan dan segala macam, tapi kemudian ada konsolidasi komunisme yang itu kemudian sekarang representasinya ada pada militer Myanmar gitu yang tampaknya juga mengambil pola yang kurang lebih otokratik gitu ya. Jadi seperti juga tadi analisis tentang Korea Utara, dia republik, tapi sebenarnya struktur dan pola pengelolaan negaranya seperti sebuah monarki yang absolut begitu ya. Dan itu juga yang kita bisa lihat pada konteks Myanmar. Nah, mungkin ya itu menarik begitu ya untuk ditelusuri. Tapi mudah-mudahan kalau ada kesempatan minggu depan masih ketemu dengan Pak Kim, kita bisa diskusikan itu lagi. Mungkin kamu bisa bilang juga ada yang tertunda dan kamu ingin dapat komentar dia begitu ya. Itu saya pikir sekarang sudah lebih dari 2 menit dari jam itu, meskipun tadi kita terlambat, saya tidak akan memperpanjang, mungkin ada banyak urusan lain yang harus Anda lakukan. Jadi kita tutup pertemuan kita, dan mudah-mudahan minggu depan tidak terlambat seperti tadi. Saya tadi terlambat karena memang di kelas sebelumnya juga terlambat. Begitu. Oke lah, begitu sampai minggu depan, mudah-mudahan sehat semua. Dadah, Ibu Wati.
Terima kasih Pak Ibu Wati.
Terima kasih Pak, terima kasih Pak.
Terima kasih Ibu Wati.
Ya, terima kasih.
Dadah, Primo.
Iya,
Halo.
ya, aduh, kuning.
Bo,
Meja saya beres ya.
beres dari Hong Kong. Oh iya, beres. Nah, meja Primo jadi beres. Kesini
Enggak,
Bo,
saya belum beresin.
Bo, kesini kapan? Masih penuh.
Dan di beresan.
Kesini yuk.
Ya nanti aku lagi ada urusan dulu nih, nyiapin buat besok. Kuliah.
Ya, minggu depan ya.
Ya kita
Minggu
lihat
depan,
mudah-mudahan.
ya?
Itu di
Mau
kampus
ngobrol, mau ngobrol.
internetnya bagus di kampus?
Iya. Hah? Oh, siap. Besok, minggu depan kita ngobrol.
Ya. Oke deh,
Belum
mudah-mudahan.
mati ya? Itu YouTube belum mati. Oke.
Ya udahlah. Oke deh.
Oke deh ya.